Welcome to Ballot Battleground, Nevada. I'm your host, Ben Marjat, a reporter at KRNV News 4 in Reno. I'm passionate about making politics in this critical battleground state more digestible to the average voter and pushing past the talking points to press politicians for answers. On this show, we take deep dives into the people, ideas, and debates shaping Silver State politics.
I don't see what they're trying to fix.
And I feel like I matter and my vote should too.
That is a layer of confusion.
So question 3 makes voting more complicated and unfair?
But we can change that with question 3.
It would be the most consequential change to Nevada's election laws in decades. Supporters say it would bring thousands of voters back into the fold and could help cure the ills of our two-party system. Opponents fear it'll lead to disenfranchisement and confusion. Of course, we're talking about Question 3, Nevada's open primaries and ranked choice voting initiative. This week, we aired the first Ballot Battleground Nevada debate on my television stations, both News 4 and Fox 11. We hope you watched, but if you didn't, we've got the full debate right here, as well as a handful of bonus questions we couldn't fit in our half-hour show. So stay tuned for extra questions on how ranked choice voting has been implemented in other states, the widespread bipartisan opposition to this measure, and more. You'll hear me first introduce a short explainer of the measure, and then afterwards the debate will begin. We have two guests from both sides of the issue to debate the pros and cons of Question 3. I'll introduce them in just a few minutes, but first, if you're not familiar, the measure would put open primaries and ranked choice voting into the Nevada Constitution, starting with the 2026 election. This would affect races for U.S. Senate and House, governor, all other statewide offices, as well as state legislators. It would not apply to the presidential race. So what is driving the push for these proposed reforms? How did we get here, and how exactly would it work? It's a sea change in Nevada politics. The 2024 election will be the first in Nevada history when neither party is the biggest chunk of the electorate. Back in 2012, the two major parties were dominant. Today, nonpartisans and third-party members in yellow are the plurality, making up 41% of all voters.
Almost a majority of Americans in almost every state really do not connect with the two-party system any longer.
That huge group cannot participate in our closed primaries.
I want to be able to participate in my elections like anybody else can.
The first part of Question 3 would open up primaries to all. Instead of only Republicans selecting the Republican nominee and Democrats selecting the Democratic nominee, all candidates, regardless of party, would appear on everyone's ballot. The top 5 vote-getters, no matter their party, would advance to the ranked choice general election. In the general, you can rank as few or as many candidates as you want, up to 5. In the first round of counting, if anyone gets more than 50%, they're declared the winner, which didn't happen in this exercise. If no one gets more than 50%, the candidate who received the fewest votes is eliminated, in this case, purple. The people who picked purple now have their second choice vote counted, and so on and so forth until one candidate clears the 50% threshold and wins. Unlike today's system, a candidate cannot win until they get support from a majority of the electorate. After passing in 2022 by 6 points, Question 3 would need to pass again this year to change the state constitution and take effect for 2026. All right, let's get to the debate now. In fairness to both campaigns, we offered them the same opportunity to provide two guests of their choosing to make their case. On the yes side, we have Molly Ellery and Mike Escobar representing the Yes on 3 campaign. On the no side, we have Amber Falgout and Kerry Durmick. Amber representing Bowborn Progress and Kerry with All Voting is Local. Thank you all for being here. Here are the ground rules. Our questions will be addressed to both guests on each side, and your side will be given a minute or 30 seconds to respond, depending on the question. If a rebuttal is needed, you'll get 30 seconds to respond. Let's keep this civil and productive and dive right in here. Molly and Mike, what's the number one reason that Nevadans should vote yes on Question 3? You guys have 30 seconds.
Yeah, so thanks for having us today. The biggest thing is right now in Nevada, we have 1 million voters who are registered and are unable to vote in our closed primary system, a primary that they pay for with their tax dollars. Not to mention the countless voters who are disenfranchised by our current political system because they feel like they are not represented by either of those parties. Question 3 would address this by opening primaries and making sure that those Nevadans who are registered have the opportunity to have their voices heard, while also making sure that the best candidates possible are put forward and that they best represent the needs of Nevadans. That's really the goal.
All right, thank you. To the no side now, 30 seconds. What's the number one reason Nevadans should vote no on question 3?
Yeah, thank you, Ben, for having us here today. So question 3 has been pitched as an only open primary ballot measure. That just isn't true. Question 3 is going to lock in a complicated and unfair new election system into Nevada's constitution. This is going to require voters to learn about 5 different candidates and rank their top 5 choices. In the states that have tried ranked choice voting, we've seen up to 10 times as many ballots being thrown out because of errors shown in a University of Pennsylvania study. Additionally, we just feel that this is no place for a risky experiment in our Constitution.
All right, thank you guys. Coming up, we'll get into the heart of this debate, starting with open primaries. Plus, what do you think? Let us know your thoughts on social media with the hashtag NVQ3debate. Welcome back to Debating Question 3 on open primaries and ranked choice voting. If you're just joining us, we have Molly Ellery and Mike Escobar representing the Yes on 3 campaign. Advocating on the no side, we have Amber Falgout and Kerry Durmick, with All Voting is Local Amber with Battle Progress. Let's get into it now, starting with the first part of this proposal on open primaries. For the yes side, why should nonpartisans or Republicans even help select the Democratic candidate or candidates to advance? Shouldn't Democrats be able to choose who they're putting forward to the general election and vice versa? You have 1 minute.
So, Ben, the bottom line is no voter should be forced to register with one party just to participate in their elections that their tax dollars help fund. All right, we all pay for these taxpayer-funded elections, so we shouldn't have to register. An independent like myself, independent military veteran like myself, should not be forced to register for a party that I don't necessarily align with all the Republican positions or all the Democrat positions, and I want to be able to authentically use my voice. Right now, 1 million independent and third-party voters are cut out of that process.
And furthermore, something that's not addressed here is the fact that we have all these disenfranchised voters who are registered to a party and they don't feel like the party candidates thoroughly represent them. And so having the opportunity to pick other candidates and weigh them on the ballot with this rate preference option gives us an opportunity to make sure that our voice is truly heard.
All right, 30 seconds now for the no side for your rebuttal to that.
I think there is some understanding that, yes, nonpartisans should be able to vote in primary elections. However, I think one of the issues we have with question 3 is that is not all it does, right? So we have a measure. If they wanted to bring an open primary measure, they could have brought an open primary measure that was a clean measure that had nothing to do with anything else. So that is the concern with question 3, is that it doesn't just open Nevada's primaries. It also institutes major changes to our elections.
And we will get into the ranked choice voting part of this in just a moment. So, Amber and Kerry, your side is advocating to keep these primaries closed to almost 1 million nonpartisan and third-party voters. So why should a third of our electorate have zero say in choosing who appears on their ballot in November? You guys have a minute.
Sure. So we don't believe that specific partisans should not have a say. However, we do have a closed primary system. In that closed primary system, you can, if you really want to, change your voter registration, vote in the Democratic primary, and then vote in the Republican primary. That is something people can do. We have same-day voter registration. That is an option for voters who want to participate in specific partisan primaries. So really, this isn't solving that issue. You can already do that.
And I think to Amber's previous point, as well as the Yes on 3 campaign could have run the open primaries as a statutory ballot measure, but instead they ran it as an open primaries and a ranked choice voting constitutional ballot measure, which is going to lock this system into our Constitution, and it will make it extremely hard to change if there are issues if this passes.
Molly and Mike, 30 seconds for a rebuttal to that.
Absolutely. So like I said earlier, we shouldn't be forced to pick a party that we don't necessarily align with in order to use our voice. We should be able to vote our conscience and to have a say in our nation's politics, no matter if we register Republican, Democrat, or independent. And same-day registration, it's beside the point. We should be able to authentically speak in our own voice.
And the constitutional issue, when we talk about open primaries, this is voting is an integral part of our democracy, and putting it into our Constitution makes sure the majority of the voices are heard, and that's key.
All right, thank you all. We did ask for questions from you guys, the audience, and you submitted some good ones. So let's dive in and hear from our viewers here. First, to the yes side, Judy Cornelius on Facebook asks, who financed the petition to get this on the ballot? You guys have 30 seconds.
Yeah, fantastic question. So this has been supported and financed by a myriad of individuals across the state of Nevada. We are supported by teachers, laborers, construction workers, realtors, gaming executives, not to mention the 525,000 individuals who endorsed this when they elected it in the first place. So we're really thrilled to have a great spread of supporters across Nevada who have donated their time, money, and resources to this initiative.
Okay, and a similar question now for the no side. This was on Reddit from Harold P., and he asks, who's paying for the opposition to question 3? You guys have 30 seconds.
So we are not representing the No on 3 campaign. We are representing our organizations, and we both feel strongly that we are no on this ballot question because it will lock a ranked choice voting election system into our Constitution. And also, I think a really important point that has not been discussed yet, not every single election is going to be under ranked choice voting. We will actually have 2 different election systems. So some races you will have to vote under a ranked choice voting system, and some you will have to vote under the current system we have now.
All right, thank you guys. Coming up, we'll dive deeper into arguments for and against ranked choice voting. Welcome back to Debating Question 3 on open primaries and ranked choice voting. Let's get into the heart of this ballot measure, which has to deal with ranked choice voting. And a question for the yes side. A 2023 study from the University of Pennsylvania found that more than 10 times as many ballots are thrown out under ranked choice voting. This means that thousands more ballots are likely to be rejected under this system. You guys, of course, argue passionately about the benefits here, but is it worth the drawback that many ballots, tens of thousands perhaps, and tens of thousands of voters could be disenfranchised? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, so something that's really key about that University of Pennsylvania study, and we have several studies that refute it, and we can go back and forth on studies all day. But what we've seen is that that's a marginal number, and a percentage of a marginal number is still a very small number. And really the issue that this comes back to is the fact that we have 1 million registered voters who are locked out of our primary system, and ranked preference voting allows the opportunity for better candidates to be brought forth on the ballot, and for education to go an extra step and to go further, and for those candidates to truly represent what our constituents need and what the individuals of Nevada need. So we can throw studies all day, but we have to look at the heart of the matter, and that's the registered voters and the disenfranchised voters who don't feel like their voices are currently heard.
And I would add to that, then another number to keep in mind is 2022. That's the year that this measure first passed. It has to pass again, but in that year, a majority of Nevada voters, more than 50%, said, yes, we want this. We want this reform. We want the open primaries. We want to be able to rank candidates according to our order of preference. We want to have our voice in the elections because we're taxpayers, we're independents, and we deserve the right to vote.
All right, thank you guys. 30 seconds now for a rebuttal to that from the no side.
Yeah, I would say there are numerous other studies besides the University of Pennsylvania study. So also a similar study in Maine showed that ranked choice voting produced significantly lower levels of voter confidence, voter satisfaction, and ease of use. And also ranked choice voting has been associated with lower turnout, particularly amongst voters of color in other jurisdictions like in San Francisco. And I really would like to hear more from the yes side about what studies have refuted the University of Pennsylvania study, because I really haven't seen that in the media or the press at this point. And at this point, it seems like a pretty good, solid study.
We'll stick with the no side now for the next question. Opponents argue that this is too complicated, that voters will be confused, but we rank things every day. My top 1, 2, 3, fill in the blank, whatever. What is so complicated about that? You guys have 1 minute.
Yeah, so I would actually like to explain how ranked choice voting actually works. So according to other cities and states where ranked choice voting has been implemented, all first choice votes are counted. If a candidate receives more than 50% of the votes, they win. However, if no candidate earns more than 50% of first choice votes, then the counting will continue in rounds. In each round, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. If the highest ranked candidate is eliminated, your vote goes to the next highest ranked candidate on your ballot. This process continues until there are only 2 candidates left. The candidate with the most votes wins. Votes win. I'm sorry, Ben, but to me, this sounds pretty confusing. Besides just saying we're going to rank something, this is going to be, I think, a heavy challenge on our election administrators, on voter education. We are already looking at an implementation cost of $3.6 million with 57,000 per year after that, and we're not even getting into the specifics on how much voter education is going to cost on this. We are looking at creating 2 election systems moving forward if this passes.
All right, thank you. To the yes side now, 30 seconds for rebuttal. Is this too complicated?
On our campaign website, yeson3nv.org, Ben, we have a 2-minute, on the first page, we have a 2-minute animated video that in 2 minutes explains open primaries and how ranking candidates according to preference wins. This is not complicated. This is asking voters to count from 1 to 5 and to fill in some bubbles. These are all things that we've done since kindergarten, maybe first grade. We believe voters are smart enough to do this. We have voter education in the works, and we believe that that's not an excuse to keep 1 million voters disenfranchised from the elections.
And further, you're putting the burden of proof of counting on the electorate when it's really going to be computers taking care of it for us.
For the yes side now, Alaska is one of only 2 states using ranked choice voting statewide right now. In there, first choice votes are tallied and reported only until the 15th day after the election. And it's only at that point they release the ranked choice results, meaning it could take 2 weeks for us to find out who actually wins this election. We don't know, of course, how Nevada will implement this, but after we've been heavily criticized for taking too long to count in the past, is it worth possibly more delays to find out who wins? You guys have a minute.
So everything that we're going to do once this measure passes is going to be in compliance with existing Nevada law, Nevada statutes. Right now, we have 60 cities and 27 states around the country that have implemented some form of system that Yes on 3 advocates. And there is much satisfaction among individuals who have used the system, again, because of the greater voice and representation that these localities feel. That said, we're not New York, we're not Alaska, we're Nevada. And in 2022, Nevada said, we want this, independents want this, people from all walks of life, military vets like myself, firefighters, police, individuals want the greater voice that their tax dollars help pay for.
And finally, Nevada has kind of shown itself as being the gold standard. We're pioneers. We like to lead the way. And saying that we can't do this is absolutely absurd. We have 9 days until after the election happens to certify those results. We are fully confident that there's going to be no issue with that. And furthermore, our state officials have said that they are prepared to implement this. And really, at the end of the day, it's a marginal cost to make sure that every voter's voice is heard and their votes count.
30 seconds for a rebuttal to that from the no side.
Sure. I would say that, like, Alaska, to their point, Alaska is very, very different than Nevada. And I think in a current Gwynn study that just came out recently, only 35% of voters currently understand our current election system. This is an uphill battle with voter education. We need to invest more money into voter education, into our current election system. I think that voter education is going to cost millions upon millions. And in a state where I'll be honest, we spend less than $1 million on voter education in this election alone. I just think this is going to be a true uphill battle.
We'll stick with the no side now. According to a 2022 Pew study, 39% of Americans say they wish there were more political parties to choose from. That number jumps up to 71% when you ask if that sentiment describes their views somewhat well. Why should we continue to use a 2-party system that a majority of Americans aren't satisfied with? You guys have a minute.
Yeah, so I would say, again, this ballot measure is not only about open primaries. I think we'd be having a much different conversation if it was. This ballot measure is open primaries and ranked choice voting. And it's not a statutory ballot measure. It is a constitutional ballot measure. It will lock ranked choice voting into our Constitution. And I think that is our biggest concern, is this being locked into our Constitution. And we will see if it passes and it wants to be repealed, it will have to go through a very expensive and ballot measure system again, where it has to pass twice. It has to go to the legislator. And I think one more point to this as well is the implementation piece. Once this passes, if this is to pass this year, and then once it goes to the legislator, the state will only have 1 year to implement a brand new election system. That is a very, very short amount of time to implement this system. And I think that is one of our biggest concerns with this ballot measure.
All right, 30 seconds now for a rebuttal to that from the yes folks.
Ben, the answer is in the question right there. You said the survey reveals that more Americans want more voice, whether that's in third parties, independent parties, whatever it is. That's exactly what this measure addresses. This measure is open primaries, ranking candidates according to preference. This measure is about giving Nevadans more voice.
And furthermore, when we look at the fact that this is a constitutional change, that's because we want to make sure that the majority of Nevadans, which currently we don't have that, the majority of their voices are heard. And that's why it's so important, because the right to vote is fundamental to our democracy. That's why this is so important for it to be constitutional.
All right, 3 states use ranked choice voting right now: Maine, Alaska, and not for all of its races, but Hawaii as well. So to the yes side, what have you guys seen from the states and cities that are using this? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of really amazing things come out of these states. Actually, most recently is 2 days ago, the Nevada Independent actually reported that Alaskans showed that 85% of their voters found the system incredibly easy to use and very easy to understand, which is a really recent study. We're also seeing that there are far more individuals with different backgrounds, diverse ethnicities, people of color being elected. For example, the New York City Council before ranked choice voting had about half of its city council were people of color. After ranked preference voting was initiated, they have 2/3 people of color on their city council, which actually matches the demographics of the city. So we're seeing that this is checking all the boxes. Those votes are going farther, and we're seeing candidates that really represent the constituents and their needs.
I'd say the statistics really back up what she just said. Really, it's just about giving more voice and more choice to the voters. We're opening those elections to those 1 million independent voters that haven't been able to participate. And by being able to rank the preference, that's making for more accountable office holders and allowing your vote to go further.
To the no side now, 10 states have actually banned ranked choice voting, and there is a statewide effort to repeal ranked choice voting in Alaska. It's going to be voted on next month. What have you guys taken from how it's been implemented in states across the country? You have a minute.
Go ahead. Yeah, so I would say how it's been implemented across the country. So again, going back to the University of Pennsylvania study, we're seeing 1 in 20 ballots being thrown out. I think this is highly concerning that we're going to have 1 in 20 ballots potentially here in Nevada, their ballots being thrown out. And so I think that is one issue with it being implemented here. I think we're going to see the costs rise exponentially. It's going to cost $3.6 million to implement this here in Nevada. Plus, we're looking at millions of dollars of voter education costs. We heard the Yes on 3 campaign earlier speak about they're working on voter education, but we still don't know what that means. There's no language in the ballot measure that talks about how this is going to be paid for, whether that's through implementation, the need for more election workers, the need for voter education. We're still not really clear on the implementation here. And again, if this is the pass in 2024 and it goes to legislator, we will only have 1 year to implement it here in Nevada, which I think is an extremely risky experiment in our Constitution.
All right, thank you. Back to the yes side. Going back to open primaries now. Let's say there's not a competitive primary on one side or the other. Are you guys worried about organized efforts to meddle in the primary, to influence who advances from the other party? You know, a group of thousands of Democrats trying to influence which Republicans advance, for example. You guys have 30 seconds.
Ben, this is about Nevada voters having more voice. So you, as a registered tax-paying voters, you're going to be able to have your voice heard in the election. So there's no concern about meddling or anything like that. This is about giving more voice to the people who are paying for these elections already.
And I think the argument of meddling and the argument of cost implementation, these are all scare tactics that we're seeing from the no side, because right now we're putting a price on a person's right to vote, and we're putting timelines on a person's right to vote, when instead addressing the issue, why don't these people have a right to vote in their primaries?
To the no side now, are you guys worried about meddling? Have we seen it in other states?
No, we are not currently worried about meddling in our elections. However, that is because we already have a system where if people want to change their party registration to vote in a Democratic primary or a Republican primary, they are willing and able to do that. That is not the issue with this particular question. And again, the yes side focuses heavily on the open primary aspect of this measure. However, that is not all it does.
All right. This measure has been opposed by some of Nevada's top political leaders from both parties, including both our Democratic senators, our Republican representative in Congress, Mark Amadei, and the Republican and Democratic parties themselves and more. What have you guys made to the no side of this widespread bipartisan opposition? You have 30 seconds.
Sure. So we have seen bipartisan opposition to this. Part of that is because of the yes side's unwillingness to be forthcoming with what this measure actually does. So you've seen our Republican governor oppose it. You've seen Senator Cortez Masto oppose it. In addition to that, organized labor opposes it. Voting rights organizations on both the left and the right oppose it. That is because they do not feel that this is a good measure for our elections.
30 seconds to the yes side. There's widespread opposition from people on both sides of the political spectrum.
So I think this is incredibly important to look at, right? One of the few times in recent history that the Democrats and the Republicans agree on something. I think it's probably something that the Nevada voters should take a look at, because 525,000 individual Nevadans said that this was something that resonated with them. It gave them an opportunity to have their voice heard. They didn't feel disenfranchised. When the party bosses and political elites agree on something, it's probably something that's good for Nevada.
Thank you. Coming up, a few more questions from you, the viewers, and both sides' final case to voters. Plus, don't forget to tell us how you feel with the hashtag NVQ3 debate. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back. We have two more viewer questions before we wrap up our debate this evening, starting with a question from Brad Kroll on email. He asks us, is there a reason why we can't just have an open primary instead of going all the way to ranked choice voting with Q3? Why did we have to do both in one swing? This is to you guys, Molly and Mike. We have heard this concern a lot. You have 30 seconds.
Sure. So these two reforms work hand in hand with each other. This ballot measure is all about getting Nevadans more voice. So the open primaries, including the 1 million independents, third-party tax-paying voters who are currently locked out of those elections, and the ability to rank candidates in order so that vote goes further, so that we have more and better choices on the November ballot in the general election. And something that we hear from Americans all the time is that we're no longer going to be stuck between the lesser of two evils: more voice, more choice.
All right, and a question to the no side for Amber and Kerry. It's from Doug Goodman. Full disclosure, he's with Nevadans for Election Reform, and he's a strong supporter of this measure. But he asks, both the Nevada Democratic and Republican Party have asked members participating in their presidential caucuses to be prepared to reallocate their vote to a second choice if their first choice did not meet that threshold. Please explain how this was not difficult or confusing while ranking under question 3 is. You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, so I would say that, once again, a caucus election is very different than a primary election and a general election. This will lock ranked choice voting into our election system. And so we've heard throughout today, it will cost $3.6 million to implement. We've had a University of Pennsylvania study showed that 1 in 20 ballots were thrown out in ranked choice voting elections. We also talked about delays and will we even be able to meet election deadlines with this new election system?
We do have time for final thoughts real quickly at the end here. 15 seconds for the yes side, final case to voters.
As a lifelong Nevada resident and a veteran who fought for the Constitution, Ben, the right to vote is a sacred right. And yes on 3 will make sure that 1 million independent voters like myself will have more voice and more choice in our state's future elections.
And the no side.
Sure. Thank you, Ben. I think voters need to think very carefully about this measure. In all of their ads on the yes side, it is yes to open Nevada's primaries. There is no mention of ranked choice voting and the implications of this measure. So they need to do their research because this will vastly change our election system and the way people vote.
All right, if you listened to our question 3 debate, we cannot thank you enough. We really appreciate you watching and listening. We hope you learned more about this measure and that it made you consider some arguments you might not have heard yet. If you can't get enough Q3 content, we have a lot more in this podcast feed already. In the past few weeks, you've heard from local reporters covering the implementation of ranked choice voting in their states, one of the advocates who started the push for this measure years ago, and a perspective from a conservative group opposing Q3. We'll put the link to all those episodes in the show notes. With the debate airing Tuesday, our schedule is a little different this week. We hope to be back in your feeds later this week because we have a ton of election news to get to. So stay tuned as we bring you all the election coverage we possibly can in this final push to Election Day 2024. If you made it to the end of this episode, I really appreciate it. If you have guest ideas, episode ideas, questions, comments, compliments, concerns, anything at all, just shoot us an email. We'd love to hear from you. bjmargott, M-A-R-G-I-O-T-T at sbgtv.com and put Ballot Battleground Nevada in the subject line. And if you have a minute, drop a rating and a review. That helps the podcast show up higher in searches so more people can find us. Thanks for listening. We'll be back in your podcast feed with an all-new episode soon.